Welcome to Random Thoughts with
Hello.
Mike Lawrence and a special guest, Emma
Special.
Briskin,
Hi,
our
Emma.
intern. Emma, how's it going?
It's going well. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
We are glad to have you, Mike. We're classing up the show a little.
finally. Well, we have listened to viewer suggestions, and that was one of the top 5 suggestions. Class it up. Class it up.
We're also going to sound a lot smarter today too, thanks to Emma joining us. But so here's what we're doing. So we're kicking off a new format. You know, we're the pandemic. We're well into a year, past a year. I mean, Mike and I can only talk about snacks and wardrobe in our families for so long before we start to shift a little. And so what we're going to start doing is once a month for the Random Thoughts, we're going to bring a special guest on and actually focus on some things that are going on in the world today for communications professionals, leaders trying to really continuing to navigate business post-pandemic. We promise it will still be funny. Mike will still be funny, but we're going to let him react to a couple different things that are probably really challenging you guys right now. And the first topic and why Emma's joining us is she wrote a blog for our Communication Essentials blog on recruiting and attracting Gen Z, which, you know, we're in the middle of a labor shortage crisis. And that's a generation, I think, as the first group starts to hit the workforce, that we could use to solve that. So we asked her to join us to talk a little bit about the blog. And our first random thought, just to show you we're so funny, Emma said, you know, should we bring her on or should we start?
Yeah.
And she said, you know, I don't get any walk-on music. And I was telling these guys, I'm speaking next month at Virtual Catalyst. And that's a plug for Virtual Catalyst, not veiled and not subtle at all. But one of the questions is, what should your walk-on music be? And that's a hard question, Mike.
It is. I mean, it's any other questions, maybe I could answer in 5 minutes, but this is one of those where, all right, I've narrowed it down to 100. I narrow it down to 10. And then you realize, oh, wait, what about this one or something? It's a near impossible task, but I've always said, you know, when in doubt, go with the 20th Century Fox fanfare as you enter the room.
That's good.
Just a bunch of horns and strings or whatever the hell it is they play in that orchestra. But
that's a good default.
Yeah.
Emma, so we didn't give you play on music. What do you have a play on song? What would it be?
I'd go old school, anything by ABBA. 70s.
ABBA. Oh,
very good.
That's right. The Dancing Queen.
Dancing Queen, yeah.
I thought you were gonna say, because we're talking about generations here, when, you know, if you would say, I'm gonna go old school, and then you say something like, you know, Kanye, or, you know, just something that, yeah, old school, right? Yeah, but that was legit. That was universally old school for.
Well, do either of you want to guess what the song was that I put down? I was total obvious. I'm very disappointed in my selection.
I wouldn't even hazard a guess. That would be.
No. I'm gonna go Bon Jovi.
How about Ben by Michael Jackson?
You're close, Mike Lawrence. You are close. I just went with the Benny and the Jets. So
Benny and the Jets.
Good one.
I thought the Godfather suite would be a little too ominous to kick off.
That's right, yeah. No.
But the topic's personal branding, and that's my favorite movie. So anyway, okay, so let's get on to the smart stuff of this episode. And people like, let's talk Gen Z. Come on. So there is a real crisis facing us right now. Just stats are out there. You don't look hard to find them. We've been talking about them. Major staffing shortage. So Emma's blog is a terrific read. I really hope you guys find time to read it. But if you don't have time to read it, I wanted to give her a chance to kind of hit on some of the key points that she brought up. And she focused on 3 key areas that really could help focus your efforts on recruiting Gen Z, and they all align to values, which I loved. And she starts off with, I'm actually going to start off with where she ended, because her last point, I think, is such a huge and relevant point, and it's on diversity and inclusion. And Emma, you say diversity and inclusion, not just HR buzzwords. So tell us a little bit about what you covered in that spot.
Sure. So in 2021, it's known you can't ignore diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on any front. especially within the workplace. And, looking at Gen Z is actually the most racially and ethnically diverse generation in history. 52% are non-Hispanic white, 25% are Hispanic, 14% are Black, 6% are Asian, 5% are more than one race. And so with that, Gen Z is really cognizant of diversity and inclusion efforts, especially growing up in this kind of political climate, the Black Lives Matter movement that has picked up. And 83% of Gen Z candidates say that commitment to D&I is important. Companies historically have, relegated that responsibility to, the HR teams. But in this day and age, I think it's really important that companies put that at the forefront. They present that information so that it's not just hidden in the background internally, that it's presented to candidates, to current employees, so that they can see really what their companies are doing, so that they can align their values with the companies.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about, the commitment to it, and, that these companies, and I would figure you'd be savvy enough to know if a company is doing the obligatory type of line, like you said, from HR, or there's a real commitment to it. I mean, could you talk about some of those things that you kind of know where they're coming from a genuine place with that commitment versus, something that might have just been, written with a certain kind of a purpose to check boxes rather than showing the commitment the company actually has and they're going to execute on it?
Sure. I mean, the internet reveals all, right? You can Google anything and see a company's track record or lack thereof. If a company has made no statements or shown no progress on D&I efforts, it's almost like they're moving backwards at this point. So, you don't have to be super front facing with all this work. A lot of the work has to be done internally, but, making a statement publicly on social media, on your website about the progress the company's making, it doesn't have to be perfect either. Just showing progress is really important, that it's an active issue that the company is working on and wants to show progress on.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I would agree. This year more than any in interviews, we've been asked about our policy, which I'm so glad for. It's been a great opportunity to open up conversation. And somebody I've been working with has over the last year on how we can be more aware and focused on being the change versus just checking boxes, like Mike said. Really focused on the importance of one-on-one interactions. And just one-on-one conversations, and one person leads to one person leads to one person, and these conversations we're having in our interview, it's great not only to be able to talk about that, but we can also speak to the fact when we counsel clients that we're being held accountable in the interview process. And Emma just nailed that point. It went from they might ask about it in onboarding or looking as part of the research, but instead putting people right on the spot in the interviews. So I thought that was a big point. I loved how she dug into it in the blog. So I thought we could start there. But you hit on a couple other points too. We have two others that you talked about. The second one is communicating frequently, communicating often, which I just think is an incredible point, because I think Gen Z sometimes gets a bad rap because they're heads down on this, and we need to shift how we think about communicating with Gen Z. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yes, there's kind of two prongs to that. The first is like communication within the workplace. Especially in this remote environment, Gen Z is really valuing those frequent and consistent check-ins with supervisors, with fellow employees. 97% of Gen Z surveyed valued regular feedback, especially weekly check-ins. I know that's something that I've had here at Akhia that's been really valuable. It's allowed me to kind of check in about where I've been with work, what my goals are, what I've been up to, and to quickly kind of squash any issues or shortcomings as they arise. And the second aspect to communication is how we're communicating, on what platforms. I have this in my hand perpetually. How am I communicating with work versus personal life versus, are those two things combining? Can I communicate on Outlook, on Teams as easily as I do email? that nuance in platform selection comes very naturally to Gen Z. I don't know how naturally it comes to maybe a millennial or a Gen X. So, incorporating social media or other forms of more casual communication alongside traditional office communications, email, Teams messages, all that is kind of valuable and a good area to look into developing for the future, especially in a remote environment like this.
Yeah, we have so many of those communication tools, and I'm Gen X, and I'm like, I guess I'll use this one for that. I guess this is a time for Slack, or this is a time for email, and I almost have to think about it rather than it being instinct to know the right time and place for it. And that's where I would lean on someone like you, Emma, to say, no, pops, you don't need to use email for this one, or stay away from that. Because I've seen it used, especially in the last year where we were getting used to the remote environment. And a Teams would come and a Slack would come, and there's email and there's IM and there's text, and they've overlapped each other a little bit. That old phrase of, this meeting could have been an email. Well, this Slack could have been a a Teams message or whatever. So just your thoughts on that, on how well your generation knows what to use and when. And I guess I'd be asking, all right, if an old fuddy-duddy like me does it wrong, will you take that as a teaching moment for us? Because I would accept it, if you would grant it.
Or just make fun of you behind your back, which is what Gen X would do.
Yes, with some
Gen
other
Z seems much nicer.
channel.
They might say something like, that's cringe, or words that my daughter and her friends are using that I don't understand. They're going so fast. They came up to me the other night. What'd you say about that bad pizza? It was like busted. Here's my daughter. What'd you say it was busted?
I said that pizza was not busted.
This pizza was not, I don't even know what that means,
Yeah.
but it sounded bad. And I'm pretty sure they laughed at me behind my back. But so go ahead, Emma. Hopefully you're a little nicer to us.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be, come from a place of understanding. Gen Z uses up to like 5 different social channels per day. So our ability to jump back and forth between apps, between devices is ridiculous. And I told you guys this. I've had moments where I'll be texting a friend in one conversation, and then at the same exact time communicating on an Instagram or a TikTok about something completely different. Same time, same person, 2 different platforms. And I can still keep up with it. And I don't know if that's just me or if that's, generational, but I do think that's a unique skill that we've kind of developed with growing up with the internet and all that, having this in our hand.
Yeah, I had something. It was during the Brown Steelers game. You remember that, Ben, the playoff game.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I think without knowing what Emma just said, using 2 ways to communicate with the same person at the same time, because you'll see the generational thing. I'm on Facebook talking about, hey, the Browns are up 28-0. A friend of mine will comment within it, but he's also texting me. So I'm texting him back and forth and using, not realizing, but where it's a little, not so much overwhelming for me, but I'm trying to track all this stuff. It sounds like, for Gen Z, oh, this is easy. It's like you're ambidextrous with the devices there, and you don't lose a step.
Yeah, I look at it as like Gen X is the annoyed generation. It's like, we'll do it so begrudgingly. It's like, if you want us to do that, but it's just like, just tell us what to do. And I think, but then on the flip side, I look at it as, I never had to think about how to communicate. You just did it. And if you were in a meeting, Mike and I had compared to meetings a lot. If you're in a meeting and I ask Mike a question, he's not gonna, pick up his phone and say, I just texted you the answer. He's going to say it back to me. So this idea of communicate in a way you were communicated to is, kind of reigns supreme. And then this idea of knowing that you need to be able to manage multiple, I think is good. So yes, I hope that we can learn and it can take some pity on us as we're learning to do all that. So speaking of balancing all these things, balance, but in a different way is kind of where you open the blog, Emma. So this will be our last point. here talking about this. So tell us a little bit about how Gen Z views balance in regards to work. Gen X was seeing their parents work and had a very different way. Millennials seeing their parents work have a very different way of viewing work. How's Gen Z viewing that?
Sure, yeah. Gen Z is really hard on the work-life balance. That's something that, we're continuing a trend of millennials who started that shift towards more flexible work, more balance within life and work. And especially, coming off this pandemic where life became work because your home became your workspace. In fact, 39% of Gen Z values it the most when choosing a workplace. So it's really important that companies take a really active role in maintaining and normalizing that balance. Normalizing taking PTO, normalizing having flexible scheduling, normalizing balance days like we have at Akhia. Those are all things that Gen Z is going to look for and value heavily when choosing a workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting. You're coming up into the beginning of your career at an interesting time where remote work has become, more common. It's unusual for Gen X, but Gen Z, they're seeing it as that is another option that we can have. I just wonder how Gen Z comes to a conclusion that they may prefer remote work without working in an office yet. What is the frame of reference besides, I don't know, watching The Office, which is a little old school by now, but from those kind of things, just where that opinion and assessment is coming from.
Yeah, there's some really interesting research on this subject coming out, throughout the course of this pandemic, and I'm sure into the next couple of years, where it's showing that Gen Z does enjoy remote work, or at least having the option to work remotely, not having to be in the office 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. But there's also negatives, there's downsides to that. And, we've touched on it a little bit with struggling to have those casual office connections, those networking opportunities, those coffee maker chats.
Yeah, that's right.
And those suffer greatly when you're remote. But the flexibility aspect of being able to do work from your computer, from the beach, from your house, from wherever you are is valuable. Gen Z wants that option, but Gen Z also really values those in-person social connections that we're missing out on in this early stage of our career because we're all working from our lovely childhood bedrooms.
Well, and to counter that, you mentioned in the blog I think about a quarter of your generation feels guilty taking PTO. And I'm struggling right now with trying to get people to take all their PTO, Mike Lawrence, because of how crazy the last year has been and so much has been left on the table. I was hoping this generation would be more willing to take it, but that was eye-opening to me, and thinking about balance and how we have to encourage Gen Z to stay focused on that. So it's all great points, more in the blog. I hope people can read it. So Emma, tell us, in closing, what's just your parting wish of what you'd like employers to know about this very, very critical demographic generation that's now entering the workforce, for them to keep in mind as the things unfold over the next 2 to 3 years as people really start to recruit Gen Z?
I think it's important that companies realize we're not coming from the same place as their most recent batch of newcomers, of interns. We were born post 9/11. We grew up, the Great Recession of 2008 was a major factor in our upbringing. And then just as we're reaching, in prime internship years, prime college years, boom, once in a century global pandemic. So, we haven't had a chance as a generation to develop those soft skills that you'd learn in a classroom, in a workplace. And so that aspect of education is going to be a really important factor going forward as we enter entry-level jobs, internships. I love mentorship. I think that's a really valuable aspect of what companies can provide for Gen Z. Having someone to take under their wing and show the ropes and kind of teach those soft skills on the job, I think will be really valuable going forward. And it's something I'm going to look for in future workplaces.
Very good.
That's a great point, the mentorship. And I think, I've been wholly impressed with, the ones coming from your generation, you yourself especially, that I think, boy, these adults, I want to say young adults, kids, that kind of thing, but no, they seem to have it more figured out than I did at that age. That's the impression I get. But we can't forget that there is a certain mentorship that is valuable, for that experience. We shouldn't just think, oh, they got it all figured out, let them go. Just the idea of let them go, but with the caveat of, helping them along where they need it. It's, I'm excited for what your generation can do. I can see the process of how, without millennials and you, I don't think the work-life balance happens this quickly. And I love it now, just the way things are going, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Mike, let's give you the same question as we close out. What do you want to tell Gen Z about Gen X? Take it easy on us. Be nice. What do you want to tell them?
Oh, well, yeah, right. What's that? Is that a notebook with a pen? You had that kind of thing. I think it is. We are in this together, and Ben, you've written extensively on it, and that the idea that we have multiple generations, but I do sense a certain closing towards the center a little bit of, I'm learning a lot from everybody, and I hope I can impart some sort of wisdom, whether it's intentional or not, whether it's, well, I should do what he does or not do what he does, depending on the circumstance. But no, I'm always just open to learn from anybody, and just to get a sense of their habits, the way they write, the way they work, the way they act, and just try to apply it to my own work life and go from there.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is, don't take anything for granted. Don't assume anything. Don't think, right, I haven't been here long enough to do that. I don't have enough experience to do that. My generation, I hate that I'm saying that because it puts me in a certain age group, but I'm going to say it. My generation, Gen X, values let's just go. Let's just get started. Let's just get it done. If you don't know how to do it exactly, that's fine. We'll figure it out as we go. But I'd rather just jump in and get started on it. And Gen Z seems really open to that. I know I can speak from experience. I've got to work with Emma closely on a couple of projects, and that's how she's worked faster than I even thought we would in figuring it out. And if that's any sign of how Gen Z is going to come charging into the workforce, if it's the way Emma's shown us, we have some great years ahead with some new talent coming into companies. So Emma, thank you very much. The blog was fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've shared it. We'll share it again. I hope people can read it. I've enjoyed getting to know you in the short time you've been here interning with us. We're going to lose you. I try to tell her college sucks. She's going back. I don't know why, but we have loved having her, and I look forward to keeping tabs on her, what will be a very successful career. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
All right. Mike, good to see you, buddy. I'm glad we're back.
Good to see you. Great to be back. I like this format too. I think the next guest has some big shoes to fill.
Yes, he does. We're going to have a little fun with him next month. All right. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon. Bye, Emma.
Bye, Emma. Bye-bye.
Bye.